Hey, buddy.
I was outside. I'm inside.
You were outside, now you're inside. Right. I was in Gems, and then Debbie comes in, so I had to leave.
Debbie came? Oh wow, she hasn't been there a long
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
She's been back for last week or.
Ugh. All right, I'm gonna go mute for a second, and then I will be right back. What is up, party people? So, decided to go on, see what's going on with everyone. I had some things on my mind, so I wanted to definitely speak on it. And to realize that something else. It's very easy to kind of distinguish between it's going to be a conversation or go around in circles. So we'll see what happens. Um, let me see. What's up? Let me go to say what's up to everyone. It's been a minute, huh? What's up, John? What's up, JL? What's up, Sam? What's up, No Name? What's up, Sam? Yeah, I already said Sam. What's up, Matrix? How you doing, sir? And Channel Q and Davros. What's up, RT? John. So he says, I don't know, man. I saw you inside. You're in the server. I know that. I get people to these roles. Let me make sure did it correctly. And everyone that just joined, I am in the process of getting you guys ready so you guys can join the panel and or in the chat. Gary, Hannah, you guys are good to go. John, yeah, you should be good to go. If you come back to the server, you should be able to jump on the voice chat. You have all the roles for it and everything. I'm not really sure why it doesn't work, but there we go. And so what I wanted to talk about was the idea that you can ask questions, and that makes perfect sense to ask questions, but at what point is it pointlessly asked? I guess it would be the best way of saying it, right? Let me see. So I was in, I had gone over to a certain live stream, and I was bantering with some people, and I'm not sure if you guys remember Raquel Life, the one that was I was interacting with in the stream before, started asking me some questions, and I realized that not all questions have to revert to mythical places. All right, what's up, guys? Go ahead and make it so everyone can see. Here we go. Yes, so they can see you. All right. So I was kind of, so I was kind of just talking about. I was over at a certain live stream whose name will be nameless, but I was talking to Raquel Life. You remember that one, Davos? The one that was I was going back and forth with a couple streams ago. And he asked me a question, and I realized that even these questions can be still stated in realistic terms and why they wouldn't work and how they work. He asked me a question, and I figured I'd ask it, and I could definitely stay on top, on my mission. So he said, could he build a 10th? Was kind of ironic, a 10,000 mile slab off his house, over one starting at 1 foot over water. And I explained to him, obviously you could. Good thing that when you build these slabs, they come in sections. But at the same time, if you want to say 10,000 miles and you want a flat slab, then you're going to end up in space. Then that's when the topic at hand in the chat or my title comes to play. When is denying science or denying anything in matters, whether it be conspiracies, whether it be science or just someone's story, um, when is it when does it make sense to deny something without a reasoning for denying it or having a explanation for why it's wrong? That's what's kind of got me going right now. I want to know how that works, because if you're asking, do you understand something, or even if better yet, we have these conversations every day where it's like, okay, we're having this conversation, but do you really understand what we're talking about? And if you don't, then why are we even having this conversation type situation? Um, that's kind of where I kind of left my stand at. I didn't want to have conversations over and over without progression. So my question would be, like, for instance, Davros, you're a good candidate for this. Cue you as well, because you kind of know what I'll be saying. If I said to you guys that are, the best one, the government is against us. Now, does that really hold merit unless I give you a reason for why I feel that way?
I find that to be a blanket statement.
Very, very, very blanket.
Well, I was just looking up memes for slab house because of what you said. This is the best I could find.
Here's the existential question on that, right? So when you say the government, is it a branch of the government? Is it the whole government? Or is it just your local government? And is that government intrinsic to every other government around the world?
Could be. Okay. Perfect. No, perfect. Because I do hold a stance on it. Okay. We'll say our pockets. Our government and its taxes, our government and its ability to actually fix anything. How about that? It's a little still blanket. I understand, but I want to kind of do it in steps.
Have you made a pros and cons list though? Like legit,
I have
sit down with yourself and been like government pros and cons.
Yes, absolutely.
How does it defeat people, and then how does it actually assist people?
I have, and to make it clear, I am definitely not in the whole they're against everyone, and we don't need a government. That to me seems almost irrational.
No anarchy.
Exactly, because we were having that conversation with the guy yesterday about that, and it's kind of one of those things where you can say, like, the idea of anarchy is something that happens, but it's not a way of living. It could be, but then we're just back to the wild, wild west, right?
Well, even in the wild, wild west, there was a government, just wasn't in the west so much. But then they deputized people, right?
That's a form of government. Or okay, here's the other thing. It's not government, it's governing. It's the idea of governing over. It's not a government, because Native Americans had a hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, a governance, yes.
Exactly. So the idea of anarchy would be to overthrow your governance, and that's where it gets fishy. Because to me, no matter what, you would form an anarchist party to overthrow a government that's doing something bad, in your opinion. But what I think a lot of the big cutoff is, a lot of people don't understand that that doesn't mean no more. It just means you need a new one, because every population, every group would need some type of ruling, right, or governance.
Yeah,
Well, I don't know
social
if they
government.
really need a governance as much as they just need like a set of stated laws that everybody agrees to abide by, and then the consequences agreed upon, and then people to enforce that, which could really just be anybody because everybody's agreed upon it. So if somebody knows somebody has broken the law, then it can be enforced. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but then someone
But
has
who
to go out and
enforces?
someone has to go out and arrest that person or
Right. So
capture.
that's what you need. But that could be anybody who sees the crime happen, right? Anybody. Because we all
Yeah.
know what the law is, and we all then therefore have the authority to enforce the law because we've all agreed upon the law.
Okay,
So
but what
you've
if
just
what
invoked hierarchy.
exactly?
I
Well,
think that
here's
anarchy is.
well, you would have to get more detailed in that hierarchy, because again, if you do something to say my family,
There is no
and
hierarchy.
okay, but then
But if you're
hang
policing a
on,
law,
but who
You
says that
do.
if you
Okay,
do
like,
no no,
look,
but if you do
we.
something to my family and I decide to police it my way, who's to say it's not what everyone else thinks is fair? Who's to say that? That's why you wouldn't have a police
Right.
force.
Let's say the police force isn't fair. So, I mean, that hasn't solved that problem.
What do you mean? Say it again.
Well, I said people say the police force isn't fair, so that hasn't solved the problem. Getting a police force hasn't made people now trust how the
no, no,
laws
no.
are enforced.
Come back to the hypothetical. Don't talk about
Saying,
police
Sean,
in your.
what I'm saying, Sean, is everybody in your community has agreed that if somebody attacks somebody's family, then that's going to be not allowed, and there'll be a consequence for that. And the consequence can be a variety of different things, and everybody will agree upon that too. So if somebody comes into your house and attacks your family, you get to enforce the law.
Okay, but
You
who
get to
says
enforce the law.
okay? But who decides? Okay, and in that decision,
Else who's not breaking
with
the law
everyone, yeah,
gets to help
in
you
that
enforce the
but
law.
do you think everyone's decision in that community is going to be the same?
No, I don't, and that's why we've created this idea, like you said, of police force to intermediate or be some sort of civil servant in mediation. But then they turned it into some sort of authority, and now people, that you see what it is now.
Yeah, but that's the same situation of okay, well, or actually, it's a perfect example of what we were talking about just a minute ago in Detroit. So Detroit's police department, they're so underfunded and no one's getting paid, so the police department just shut down. Well, communities decide, well, we still need someone to protect us, and they form their own police department, a police department that they
Militia.
probably can trust. Yes, it's a militia because it's not state or
That's
federal.
anarchy. That's
Is
anarchy.
No, no, no. A
no.
militia a militia is a controlled group of people that govern the law, but are not actually held in that position.
And it doesn't need to be that state's law or anything. It's just a law. It's the same thing as we have a military. Well, we also have the guerrilla forces, basically mercenaries, basically which damn Blackwater. That's the same thing as it would be militia. If they were on the streets, it'd be a militia policing the streets. There he is. What's up, John?
I think he ate his microphone.
But you see what I mean, though, right? It what you're saying is the police force may be shit everywhere. Well, if a community decided to replace that police department with a better or trustworthy police, then it's still setting into a hierarchy. It's setting into a governance still. That's the thing about anarchy. No matter what, it's always going to lead back into a governance system. Otherwise, everyone has to fend for themselves, and a community no longer becomes a community. The guy was saying yesterday, he kept saying over and over again, what about, God damn it, hang on.
Get your book.
I'm trying to figure out why my internet just keeps going to crap.
That's buffering.
Yeah, I know. That's the problem. I'm on an Ethernet cable, so I shouldn't be buffering at all.
I've seen it buffer 3 times, and it's buffering as we speak.
Yeah, no, I'm seeing it too. Let me see if I try taking it down a notch.
Oh, it's because we're speaking about overthrowing the government.
Yes.
Should we?
There is some form of governance, even in an anarchist society.
I don't think that's all that
That-
is entailed in governance.
But that's the general. So governance means to follow a set of rules set out by the consensus.
Okay, I mean, we can say that.
Because a government is governing you, but the governance is what that government has put into place for you to follow.
I feel like a government is different than a governance. Because like I feel like a government would entail like these people who are like campaigning and they're setting tax rates and they're doing all these other things. They're not just trying to keep the world civil or fair or just. You see what I'm saying? There are
Yeah,
all
but that's
these
what I
other
said.
things.
A government is governing you, right? They are the one controlling you. But the governance is the rules they've put into place that you follow without them having to enforce them.
What
Such as
rules?
paying your water rates, paying your electricity.
So you can enforce that. They'll turn it
it's-
off if you don't pay for it.
That's
Yeah, it's not the
enforcing.
government turning it off.
Well, those companies aren't government companies, so why would the government?
Yeah, but
they're private
they're
companies.
covered by governance. They have to follow a code of practice that the government states that they have to follow to provide for the public.
Yeah, if anything, it'd be like saying the government is a body that oversees the governance, like Digital was saying. I think just once you say government, you're kind of you're jumping past so much.
Yeah, but what I was explaining is the role of a government compared to governance. So governance is a set of rules and regulations that are in place, whether there's a government or not. But there is still someone who has the hierarchy of control to be able to show or control or enforce that.
Well, no, I think
without
a community,
elected officials.
I think what Channel Q was saying is the same, falls into the same lines of governance, where you don't need elected leaders or parties to do so. I think you make a government that simplifies the governance, and that becomes the government. 100 voices can't be all heard, so you would simplify it. That may be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 different people that feel the same way as different groups, and then that becomes the government. I think a government is when you start speaking for others. You're
Or you just have a dictatorship.
Well, really what the government does, if you think about it, is they just speak at us. They don't really speak for us.
I think now
they speak at us a lot because they give us a lot of speeches. They spend most of their time campaigning to get elected, and then the rest of the time they spend deciding how to spend the money they get from us.
Well,
so it's like,
okay.
What's the point of that?
Here's
That's
the
not really
question.
making sure people are abiding by laws.
Was there ever a time when it wasn't them talking at us? It was actually them working for us? Do you think there ever was a time?
Lifetime. Not my lifetime. Not since I've been born. I don't know. By the way, tribes run their situations more than say civilizations in every era. Okay.
Well, you don't think that a tribe would run into the same situations as we do?
No. I think that the major difference between, say, like a tribal thing would be the preservation of tradition is very important, and then in that sense, they don't continually evolve. Say, like in these cities that have evolved out of their britches, and now infrastructure is crumbling and nobody cares. So it's just like there was no preservation of tradition. There was no preservation of bricklayer tradition or this tradition. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but
people evolved. They're like, okay, well,
isn't
everybody
the- isn't
outsourced
the-
this kind of manufacturing, so
but
everybody
isn't
gets
our
into a different kind
elections-
of.
Aren't our elections the same thing?
You mean election? Well,
A
same
tradition?
as what?
Tradition?
Well, yeah, an election, I guess, is the same thing as a tradition, but I don't think it's necessarily been preserved either.
Why? I mean, it's
Evolved.
pretty
It's
concrete.
become, well, I don't know. I think a lot of the subtle aspects of elections have evolved. Like the ways people campaign, the ways people are informed about who they're voting for, the ways the votes are tallied, the ways the votes are given. But that's the point of cities. The cities is to constantly, evolve and improve and come up with new ideas. And what ends up happening is you end up making a whole group or generation of people obsolete and a whole way of life obsolete constantly. So that's a problem. Whereas when a tribe has a tradition, it's generation after generation is taught to preserve the tradition and do everything the same way because that's what's working and that's,
Yeah, but if that
But
it's
if a
just
but
my
if a
opinion,
but if a tribe suddenly has a boom in population, like a baby boom, things may change. If food becomes scarce, things may have to change. I'm just saying that I think that a tribal structure or a governance structure or even our government structure.
think that there are traditions to actually control so that we do not have baby booms in these circumstances. Whereas in societies, it's like a do as thou wilt, right? Which I'm sorry to say that quote, but I'm gonna. So if you don't want to have any kids, don't have any kids. If you want to have a lot of kids, don't have a lot of kids. And they have doctors to help you either way. The doctors who can make you give birth to 8 babies at once if that's what you want. All right. But in a tribe, if they got a lot of mouths to feed, they might say, okay, nobody's going to get pregnant. They might separate people so nobody gets pregnant. They might have traditions for these kinds of things. Traditions for when they're going to have children, when they're not going to have children. And it's not going to be like the same thing. It was in the society. It's like chaos. Anybody makes this individual choice. It's not for the whole tribe. With a tribe, they always think about the benefit of the whole tribe and everything that they do.
Well,
and the
and that's how.
biggest
Affect
benefit
their
for the
environment.
tribe, is babies
Yeah. Well,
because it
see, I
prolongs the.
mean, that's what this, because I don't really feel like it would ever really be a problem. They are in a society that is incredibly inefficient, such as what we have going on
What makes it inefficient?
in our society. Everything.
But isn't that what
The
happens
number one
everywhere?
thing people complain about is the
Isn't
number
that
one thing people complain about in America is inefficiency.
isn't that why there isn't any more big large tribes anymore either? And it's not
You
a
know,
government that does it, it's the people that do that. I'm pretty sure, like I was saying, at one point I'm pretty sure the government was like awesome to everyone
and
because it was no
moves
anarchy
people
anymore.
around. Pretty sure the government causes people to have to move around, people to have to move into cities. Pretty sure government caused like the murder of a lot of like native tribes.
Pretty sure they did. I'm pretty sure a
So
lot of things did. I don't think it was 100% to
I'm
the
pretty sure some of
executive.
that happened before you had a government in the country too.
Yeah, yep.
see,
Like
that's
in
why it's hard.
Australia,
It's hard to.
we didn't have parliament until 1901.
Yeah, it's hard to like separate these concepts and decide what part of government is like necessarily the problem or keeping or
It's
not
not.
keeping.
Well, that's the thing. That's what it is. It's not the government. Literally, it's not the government because the government is the ideal of what we need. It's the people.
Well,
Now
yeah,
forming now forming a way to actually get rid of the bad people, that's a problem that we got to figure out. That's when you start talking
well,
that
that's always
anarchy
going to be a
shit.
problem because you can't just put a stamp on people's foreheads and execute them. You know what I'm saying?
I don't see why not.
You can just call people bad and got to go through a whole process. But that's the thing. I agree because it's up to each individual to like live up to the ideal, and in order for the ideal to become a reality.
Mm.
And then you have anarchists.
What?
There's always someone that goes against your premise.
But see, that's the thing. How can you be an anarchist? can't you just be for anarchy?
Yeah, well, some people only believe in the political stance of anarchy, which is the lack of governance, whereas scientifically, anarchy means chaos.
Chaos, right?
Yeah, disorder.
So to disrupt something rather than so what? Well, that's what they basically what they call that is what is that, Sharia law or whatever.
Yeah, well, rioting is classified as anarchy by the social group.
Any type of okay, so that's not even so much of overthrowing a government; it's just the act of not listening to your government or going
Yeah,
against them.
yeah, it's going against the consensus of the government or the social standing of the neighborhood. Therefore, you are being uh, you are creating anarchy in an ordered system.
Ah, I see. And in that system, see, so because I have a question, then what is a way to funnel out the assholes that have effed up the government? What would be a
Well,
way?
the best way would be to get some real investigators to investigate, and I'm sure we could find them have committed many crimes to which we could put through our judicial system and then have them incarcerated.
Okay, what about the ones we miss?
Well, if we get enough of them, the ones we missed should end up standing out like sore thumbs, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Shoulders with people who aren't going to want to go down those roads.
True. Yeah.
Hello again.
What's up, Skyfly?
Hi, people.
It's Brian Damage.
No,
Yeah,
I'm not Brian Damage on Skyfire Bright tonight.
Oh, sorry, I
It's
just
some
heard the
sort of-
voice and I thought you were going to get all mad. And
I only made up that account so I could chat in Dale's chat because he blocked my other account, this account.
I'm just happy you could hear everyone.
Oh, I used to have that problem, yeah, back on the olden days. I remember that. Yeah, it was funny, wasn't it?
Not the olden days. It was like a month ago.
That was never, he never had that problem in Discord. He only ever had that problem on the old Yahoo Hangout or Google Hangouts.
Ah.
It was only in the Hangouts that he had that problem.
Well, I'm gonna be probably doing it this way from now on because it doesn't make like this is I don't even know why I never did it, but streaming from Discord is so much easier. It's like everything about it. I mean, getting people to like set up for it is a pain in the butt, but once everyone's here, then it's so much easier.
yeah, there was a problem there for a while with Discord, and you weren't able to stream Discord through OBS.
Mm.
Are you
Can
live
you
now?
guys hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm live.
Awesome.
Hello, John.
Yes, we do hear
What?
you. Man.
Yeah, I'm just listening.
I don't hear
wondering when
somebody.
to
I don't hear
when to
John.
jump in.
Yeah, you do.
Who's John?
Do I?
John Watson.
Do him?
John Watson, you know, Sherlock's friend.
Yeah,
I'm
John,
going
John Watson.
to go and find your live stream so I can add to your watch time because I haven't got it open.
Okay.
John Watson recently had a holiday down in Australia.
I seriously don't think I can hear John Watson.
Talk real
It
quick.
was
John.
pretty smoky.
Yes, it is really smoky,
See, I don't think I can hear him.
but I can.
You may need to back out and come back in, channel. See, you
Tell
jinxed
John
yourself.
Watson to say my name, and if I don't hear my name when I see him light up, then
Channel Q, I've always
yeah,
loved
see, I
him.
don't hear him.
Okay. At least you backed out, came back in.
Yeah, John, do you realise I've been living on the surface of the sun?
Yeah, it's not
Now I
it's
hear
not a
him.
good situation.
No, it wasn't. It's been a bit cooler last 2 days, though.
See, hey, channel,
Yes.
an Australian talking about the fires.
Oh, was he?
Yep. Davros is in Australia.
I couldn't hear John Watson, so I had to leave and come back.
Can you hear him now?
Can
Yeah,
you
I
hear
think
me
so.
now?
Yes.
See, you jinxed yourself.
Why did I jinx myself? Maybe you guys had a meeting about it and you're like, oh shit, she knows we're not in Australia.
Conspiracy. It's the kangaroo conspiracy.
She knows, she's figuring out we're not really in Australia, guys. Somebody talk about the fire and then we'll point it out.
Well,
Make it real obvious.
Davros is our Australian weatherman and fire expert.
Oh, really? He's an expert on fire, huh?
Yes, I just found the watch page. Thank you, and I've posted in there. Thank you.
No problem, Skyfly.
Look, apparently, you guys are going to get trapped in the center of Australia by fire if you don't get out now.
What? Why don't we go to the ocean?
See, now look, Blue joined and I can't hear Blue. Can anybody else hear Blue?
Blue hasn't said anything.
Nobody's heard Blue talk, but he's definitely talked.
I heard him there.
He's a strong silent type.
Oh, hello, Blue.
Hello, Q.
True blue, baby, I love you.
Now,
Oh, shit.
so before Skyfly got here,
I'm
we
leaving.
were talking anarchy and governance and government and how it works. Blue would probably be the best to be in this conversation because he was here before any kind of governance ever happened.
You weren't asking us how are we supposed to weed out all the bad guys from the government.
Well, see, Blue was around before your Declaration of Independence.
He's the one who...
Come on.
He invented the...
Yeah, they pick on me.
But
I
for... actually, Blue, okay. I asked this question to Q a little while ago. Hang on. My bad.
Puff, puff, puff.
Shut up, Davros. All right. So I asked this to Q earlier, and it kind of dawned on me that I'm in the same boat where we don't remember a time where the government wasn't so shady. Was there a time? I mean, you've been around the whole time, so was there a time when the government actually made sense and it actually did work for people?
Not in my lifetime.
Damn. So basically, any kind of government.
It's not like America invented governments. It's just like an adapted idea from the monarchies and shit, dude. Come on.
Okay, but then what other choice do we have?
Technically, democracy is a direct response to monarchy. So it was like predetermined. You just set up a monarch and then eventually you get democracy.
Actually, democracy was invented by the Greeks.
Democracy is anarchy.
Actually, like the way Winston Churchill put it, they said democracy is the worst imaginable form of government except for all the other ones.
Yes.
You know what happened? It was today or yesterday in the UK. Is a new governor of the Bank of England was appointed. Now he is one of the most the governor of the Bank of England is one of the most powerful people in the UK, and he's not elected; he's just appointed. The public have no say, and possibly it's quite right that the public don't have a say because nobody knows who the right person to appoint is, I suppose. But yeah, he's an extremely powerful person, and he just gets
Bank of England also a private company still.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So you're getting bent over, are you, John?
Well, in more ways than one. But it's a really big problem for a lot of people. I mean, you've got people like Mark Carney, the outgoing guy. He seemed like a pretty decent kind of guy. But these are people that are just put in place from the city, who have no common ground with your average person, and they set the interest rates and etc. And it's not a just system at all.
Yeah.
I remember the spitting image reference from the 80s where Ronald Reagan was president. They said, democracy, crumbly candy bars. Isn't it amazing that a president such as myself become president?
Yeah.
Obviously, in the UK, that's the spitting image program. If you've not seen it in America, you won't know what I was saying.
Yeah. You won't get another spitting image again.
I'm trying
Not
to
proper
find
one.
a pros and cons list.
Can I just ask John Watson? I thought John Watson was a flat earther.
Wrong, John.
Oh, that's
It's the wrong John.
Yeah, it's got
That's,
John without an H. Yeah, okay, fair enough.
All right, so
I was a
yeah,
bit concerned there.
that H makes all the difference, apparently.
Yeah, the H makes you flat.
so I
Well,
found
Skyfly.
a
Skyfly.
link
It's the
to a
fact.
pros and cons of working in the government, or the government working or not. I'll show it to you guys, and then I will put it on.
John knows Australia exists.
Well, it might have been a hallucination.
But it was a good hallucination, though, wasn't it?
I've had other more vivid hallucinations in my time.
I'm sorry, we're not the Technicolor experience you thought we were.
All right, so I found the pros and cons. Damn, oh, I know how to do it. If you guys want to see what I'm looking at, you guys can share the go live thing, Majigger, because they're still new too. Okay, so one of the pros, I guess, so the pros of a working government, it says the chance to make a difference. Government employees work to enhance the lives of people in the United States and around the world. You can play a virtual role in ending homelessness, finding cures for diseases, and keeping our food supply safe, and much more. That sounds like bullshit.
That sounded very much like just bend over rock on your ass and you'll feel good about it.
Yeah, that didn't.
Yeah, take my propaganda.
Yeah, that
and
didn't
stick
feel
it up your
warm.
bum.
That didn't feel warm and cozy at all. It says,
You know what that sounds like? That sounds like you're going to be passing out a lot of pamphlets with a lot of bullshit written in them.
Yes, exactly. So another
And
one.
asking people to donate to programs.
Yeah, lots of it. It says great benefits and competitive pay. Average government salaries. Okay,
Competitive pay.
That's what they get paid, and it's not very competitive at all. There are so many ways around it. That's so entertaining. I've done many military contracts with civilian contracts with the military, and I can tell you right now there are so many loopholes.
Wait, Sean, right there it says cons. You won't get rich working in government.
Well, I haven't got to the cons yet.
But that's a direct contradiction to what you're reading on the pros side.
Oh, you're so right.
Competitive pay, but you won't get rich.
It says you won't get rich. While many government salaries are comparable to those in the private sector, there is a pay ceiling for a range of federal positions that leaves the federal employees with lower salaries than they might have gotten in the private sector. Many of the government's
not
top
fucking
professional
rich.
jobs pay annual salaries of the range of $117,000 to $177,000. Damn, that's a lot of fucking money.
Does that qualify as rich, or am I wrong?
That's still very middle class.
Oh, we compared to some people who got $3 gazillion.
Exactly.
Bagazillions.
It says the pros of a working government: location, location, location. Whenever you want to call home, federal jobs likely are available. Nearly 85% of the federal government jobs are outside of Washington, D.C. Area, and more than 50,000 federal government employees work abroad. Okay, yeah, that's not a pro to it. This work. Oh, this is actually working in the government, not a working government. This is all. That's why it sounds
This is
so
shit.
weird.
This is shit.
Yeah, I felt like
Propaganda.
this was for college students.
Okay, wait. Here's.
Like some campaign to try to get people working at the DMV again.
Let's see what this.
Is
blogger
there
says.
another section on like all the underhand means that politicians make money aside from their salary?
Oh, shit! I got a whole site for that.
Congress has to spend most of its time calling people on the phone and asking them to donate to their campaigns.
But we
Do they
started
have a
this conversation-
requirement to raise a certain amount of money to keep their chair?
Hey,
So-
Davros, is your prime minister back from holiday?
Yes, he is. After he got called out for being a dick,
Yeah, he did.
he went to
It's-
Hawaii whilst New South Wales was burning.
Well,
Well,
there's
that
nothing
sounds
wrong with
smart.
that, but I think
From
the
Hawaiian
main.
firefighters.
I think the problem was saying no, I'm not in Hawaii when he was in fucking Hawaii.
Look, I think you probably just went to Hawaii to learn how to fight forest fires. You know, they don't have any forest fires in Hawaii.
Uh,
They don't.
No, it's the fact that prior
Wait,
to
time out.
his...
Whoa, wait, hang on.
Hang on, hang on,
Shit.
hang on. Hang on.
The volcanoes burned down all the forest fires.
Right, so prior to Scott Morrison being the Prime Minister, back when we had the Black Saturday bushfires, he turned around and blamed Kevin Rudd for not being in the vicinity when it was happening.
oh
Right.
dear.
So what happens in 2019 when New South Wales is on fire? He pisses off to Hawaii. Hypocrite much?
Hawaii's
Well-
not that far from Australia.
Well, our politicians scream for lowering greenhouse gases and then get into their jets and fly to the next rally.
Hey.
And just for the record, Hawaii has a forestry program. Therefore, they do have a forest. Therefore, they do have wildfires. And yes, they have forest fires.
Yeah, I was making a joke, dude.
Oh.
They said that their prime minister went on vacation during a forest fire, and that's saying, oh, he just went to learn about forest fires from Hawaiians. Come on.
Well, geez, what do you
This is the
say?
stupidest thing ever.
Why the hell would he need to go to Hawaii to learn about forest fires when he's got one in his own bloody backyard?
Because it's beautiful.
I know it
this
was a
time of
joke,
year.
but
I don't know why he needs to go to Hawaii when he's got stuff to do.
They've got lava.
I'm just trying to give him some save some face here.
don't.
Okay,
Dude,
so
look, they're
we
all
were just
falling
talking-
apart, dude.
we were just talking about someone
Everybody's
said
prime
something about
minister.
how much the government gets. So check this out. I love this website. It's called opensecrets.org. It basically
Sounds reputable.
oh no, you should check it out. All it does is it shows the pay scale of the people in the Senate and the House. It also tells like what they're invested in, and this is like one of the sites I go to when I was talking about all the climate change stuff and why they don't want oil to stop. This is the place I go to because most of these people are all involved with oil industry and all these other ones. Huh? Say again?
God. They're all involved with God.
I wouldn't doubt
What?
it.
Guns, oil, and drugs.
We'll see. Hang on. Well,
Guns, oil, and drugs, dude. God.
You're gonna see more
God.
of the realistic stuff here.
I got it.
Thanks, Blue. I knew you would.
To get shit on the focus.
That might be a Texan joke.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's actually God P because if you've got guns, oil, drugs, and prostitution.
No. You could just say gods. And then you could add sex. Anyways, the NRA supports gun control.
Do you have a flag?
They do.
I know they do. We should.
Come on, I'm trying to be serious.
No flag, no country.
Oh, that's Izzard.
That's a rule I just made up. Me and this gun that got given to me by the NRA.
Doesn't give God-given rights to anybody.
Is Charlton Heston still
What are you
alive?
looking at here, Sean?
I'm looking at what the top earners in the Senate, what they're invested in, and what their income is. So, like
Okay,
this
cool.
guy Daryl Issa, he's like one of our California representatives.
ISIS? Oh no.
Now,
Issa, but
gravity.
No.
Gravity.
so just like here in let me see, 16, that's the last one. So, and he's invested in $58 million worth of real estate, $3 million in miscellaneous business, and his top assets are some kind of short duration loans and some other banking service. But what I was saying is I go to this one because it shows you like all the different companies that they work for or work with or get money from. I'm trying to see if I can find it. Assets. Like a lot of these guys are all part of some type of like oil or gas CO2 contributing company and shit. Not all of them, but most of them. I'm not doing all 26 pages.
I just don't even believe anybody has this kind of money. It's just made up, dude.
Is it?
Money's made up.
Well, when you say it like that, yeah, but it's
Okay, these people are not going through what average people are going through to get money.
Hell no.
So their money's made up.
I'm trying to see. Where is it? See, like Quantum Energy Party. That's oil. What do you call it? The oil fucking people drill crude oil.
It's oil. It's just oil.
Quantum energy.
Huh?
Quantum energy.
Yep.
Tycoons, that's the word, tycoons.
Tycoons. No.
Oil
Yes,
tycoons.
oil tycoons.
An oil tycoon. The days of
Yeah,
oil
there's the
tycoons
person
are
at
long
the head
gone.
of an oil company is the tycoon.
Tycoon is a guy who just founded
See?
a well
Yeah,
and then
well,
got rich off of it.
Quantum Energy Party.
It's not a guy who inherits or invests in.
Yeah, these
These kids aren't
classified
owning
as
any oil
oil
companies they're
tycoon.
invested in.
Okay, now here's
It's
my question.
J.R. Ewing from Dallas.
Here's my question. Isn't that conflict of interest?
What's a
What?
conflict of it?
If someone
They're
in the
not
house, huh? They're not what?
Lawyers.
They
They're
don't
not
do-
attorneys.
Yeah, they're in the house. They're the ones who make votes
There's
on.
no conflict of interest on that though. That only pertains to like attorneys and doctors.
Wait, so you're telling me that someone who makes decisions in our law, policies, and regulations, and if they have vested interest in fossil fuels, they don't
Yeah,
have.
it's not a crime. It's not a crime. The only time it can be a crime is
I know it's
with
not a crime,
attorneys.
but it does.
Oh, okay.
Conflict of interest isn't always. Doesn't always state it as a crime. That's just what I believe it is.
But in this,
Sure.
it would be an assumed conflict of interest because you're assuming that it would conflict with their interests as a politician or as a government worker.
Oh, no. Hang on. So
You
the
know,
conflict of
actual
interest,
proof.
right? When it comes to being a politician in a seat of government that has a way to influence particular things that have to do with the company you're involved with is a conflict of interest.
Okay, well, if we're trying to see, I see conflict of interest. I just don't see anything.
Because is your interest in the government or the profiting of your company? Which one is it? Because if you manipulate
One could
a law
argue.
if you manipulate a law or an amendment or something in your government to make you more profitable, that's the conflict of interest.
Okay, well, if you say we're going to take the regulations away from methane, we're going to use these CO2 scrubbers to increase the production of oil, and we're going to make this all into a regulation which will give you some type of subsidy. You don't think that's putting more money in his pocket?
Yeah, that's conflict of interest.
Okay, then
He's using.
Then it's
Okay, well, we shouldn't trust that guy anyways because he has 2 first names. Richard Allen. He's probably a serial killer.
And
you stay out of it too, Davros. Goddamn it, we put up with you guys piddling around with the moon all the time. Even though our flag's on the moon, we still let you turn it upside down. That's all okay, but leave our politicians alone. We've got the corruption exactly the way we like it.
It's granted.
Like it. We did not turn the moon upside down. It was the fact that in my frame of reference, you guys are wrong.
That's what your freaking prime minister's doing in Hawaii. That's where the damn knob is that turns the sumbitch upside down. He's up there piddling with the moon again.
You learned that from Pete. I asked him where the line was that the moon rolled over.
It does? I'm so confused. I thought it was someone taking every time someone shows me a picture, I just think they turned it upside down.
Where's the point of the moon sideways?
Batman.
It's all CGI.
Oh shit! Crash.
Look at
hey, go,
this
buddy.
guy. It's got so many zeros in his money, dude, that it's just I can't even believe it's real. I think he's a poser.
Where?
Brutal.
It's a total poser.
I'd like to have a couple of them zeros in my bank.
No, you wouldn't, dude. The more zeros, the more problems.
Crash hasn't got any zeros in his bank account. That's why he would like a couple.
Yeah, no shit.
No money, more problems.
No money, all problems.
Yeah, $2,000 for 5 days of my life. That was awesome.
It's like a mini vacation.
I could take a vacation for 2 weeks for cheaper than it was for Crash to have his vacation.
For like all you can eat.
I could go to Hawaii for 2.
I could eat a real steak. Hey.
Dude, they're gonna start growing steaks on the outside of cows now.
Oh, we already talked about that. That's not possible. Because then they're going to start
Yeah,
putting then
they'll be under the skin.
Yeah, but then
that's not on
They'll
the
be
outside.
under the skin, but on the outside.
How can it be under the skin and on the outside? That's an oxymoron.
Because let's say it's like a T-bone, right? It won't grow. They'll grow where the T-bone normally grows, and then it'll grow extra T-bones on like its outside, like on its rump. Can just be removed. Extra one.
But if it's under the skin, it's not outside of the animal.
Yeah, but if it's like an implant in and out or something.
That's still not outside. It's an implant.
It's like plastic surgery.
Like a lot of trouble to go through when you could just whack the critter in the head with a pipe. Be done with it.
But then you have to you gotta skin it and cut its entrails out, clean it, do all the butchering. This way, you just walk up to the cow, shave off the T-bone, patch the cow up, and wait for another one to grow back.
That wouldn't happen because the T-bone is inside the ribs, so it's inside the body.
No, we're gonna grow the T-bone on the outside of the cow.
No, it's not possible. They adapted pigs to grow bigger, and they're much larger now. They used to weigh like 50 kilos, and now they weigh like 98 kilos.
Because they already do it to chickens. They make chickens grow extra breasts, but they don't want to keep doing it. They want to switch to cows because the chickens keep breaking their legs because they can't carry around such big breasts.
Oh, of course, they've only got like thin legs, haven't they?
That's what they're doing.
I'll just go hunt deer.
Didn't they mix a pig with something else? What was that about a few years back?
I don't know, but I think we should go back to talking about how much money this guy has in oil.
Yeah, Skyfly, just remember, pig and elephant DNA don't mix.
Can you imagine how much bacon we would get out of that, though?
Yes, but South Park know that it doesn't work.
South Park also has man-bear pigs, so
What?
Yes, but they also predicted that, and The Simpsons did it too, that Trump would be president.
They said a lot of things on there that haven't come true. Did you ever take that into consideration at all?
Yeah, but we're going down a conspiracy route, so we can say anything we freaking want, Sean.
Not without explanation.
Sean,
Yes.
a conspiracy with an explanation that is factual. Interesting.
You don't think they exist?
Hang on, Sean. Hang on. I understand conspiracies are real, but what they state may not be.
I did a lot of YouTube research, and The Simpsons predicted 30 things correct.
And how many shows that they had?
1,000 and something.
Bad explanation.
Hey, that's a 3% hit rate. That's pretty good.
I don't think so. I don't agree.
They also predicted Trump's impeachment because that's how Lisa became president.
Well, that's a gimme. And it does nothing. And Lisa wouldn't become president in a real world.
It'd be Yardley Smith.
No one's going to be. He's not going anywhere. Especially because we're doing elections soon. What is wrong with you people?
Actually, that's a question. Does impeachment mean you have to be thrown out as president?
Nope.
Right. So some people are full of shit then.
The Democratic Party has impeached him. Now the Republican Party would have to do the same for him to go on to trial.
And that's not going to happen because they control the Senate.
There you go.
Exactly.
You know what the Democrats should be doing is trying to present a decent candidate for the election coming up.
Yep.
Yeah, all they're doing right now
There's
is...
no fucking way Joe Biden is ever gonna win now that he's like creepy Uncle Joe, dude. No fucking way.
Well, what's going to end up
So you
happening...
gotta dump him.
What's happening is the Democratic Party is playing a smear campaign on the Republicans for the next election. That's all that is.
Of course.
That's all that's happening.
And the Republicans
That's all they
are
ever do.
gonna
They don't.
win.
They just. They're not. That's why this is
Can I
bullshit,
run under
dude.
my own party?
Yes, we need the crash party.
You have to, if you want to run for president, you have to campaign yourself $50,000 or $55,000. So if you can get $55,000 donated to you to run for president, you can put your name on the ticket. Yes. That's how it
Well,
works.
that sounds like an
It
awesome
says
GoFundMe
to
project.
serve as president.
The only other requirement I think is that you just had to be born a U.S. citizen.
Yeah, it says to become president, you have to be a natural-born U.S. citizen of the United States, be at least 35, be a resident of the United States for at least 14 years, which kind of excludes the natural-born. Anyway, a person who meets the requirement above should, however, still be disqualified from holding the office of president under any of the circumstances listed below. If you've ever been upon conviction of an impeachment case, the Senate has the option to order by simple majority that the individual be disqualified from holding federal office, which includes that of a president. And that's what you were just saying. The Senate is ran by Republican right now, which means they would have to then impeach him and then have the order of disqualifying him under that.
Yeah.
Article 1,
Correct.
Section 3.
So everybody who's saying he's been impeached are wrong, dude. All they did was decide to take their evidence to a trial with the Republicans, and then the Republicans had to decide, and then he becomes impeached. The Democrats are
The
wasting
two
their
grounds
time.
for impeachment are being
It's
lodged with the
two-
Senate. Therefore, he can be impeached.
Well, I'm just going to
two-step
say innocent
process.
until proven guilty, okay?
Yeah, he's going through due
Innocent
process
until
via
proven
the
guilty.
Senate. But the Senate are Republicans. They can turn around and say,
Not
They
going
just
to.
have to. Yeah, they're not going to vote. They're not going to vote to impeach him. It's not going to happen. It says the impeachment process, which with the legislative body levels charges against a government official. Impeachment does not in itself remove the official definitely from office, it is similar to an indictment or a criminal law, and or thus is essentially the statement of charges against the official. So
That's
them
correct.
impeaching him,
The trial, the impeachment takes place in the House.
impeachment is like
That's
saying,
like an indictment,
yeah, they're
and the
subpoenaing
trial
you.
takes place in the Senate. In the Senate.
Yep. And
Yeah, the only thing that's happened so far is the Democrats have deposed each other to figure out what kind of evidence they have against Trump. And now they all agree that they have enough evidence to take it to trial. That's all that's happened.
Exactly.
Yeah, nothing's coming from that at all.
Hello, party people.
What's up, how are you doing?
Where's Lewis? Where's your friend, the asshole?
Gracious, that was pretty pathetic.
Who was
geez,
that?
And in the truest sense of that word, pathetic.
He needed
Poor
a
guy.
hug. That's why I
He really
posted that
did.
picture on where on this doll has President Trump hurt you?
Poor Lewis. If those weren't there, Lewis was just like, "Shut up, everyone! Shut up! New people come in. You new people spoiling it."
Okay, I got a question. Now back on.
Yes.
At any point, do you think? And I feel this way. Trump made it very clear. I mean, a lot of us already felt that way, but he made it very clear that the president, he don't really run the country.
No, you do not.
No, the president runs the government.
No, not even.
Yeah,
the lawyers.
Okay.
I believe it's the lawyers, and all Trump is a pretty face. He got elected.
He's just the head of state.
He got elected. He got elected because his face had been seen more. He has a familiar face, and that's why people felt comfortable doing it.
Okay.
He got elected because the military behind him, and he promised that he would end the war in Syria, which he did. He pulled us out of Syria, and the military voted for that, dude.
The military isn't the population of the United States, though.
So my son and I, here's the moment I knew.
Everyone they know.
Even though I didn't know, my son and I were at Burger King, and we were talking about the election because he's just at that age where he's starting to be interested. And so we looked at the TV screen, and we was like, I wonder who's going to win. And I said, whose face is on the TV screen? Trump. Whose face is on the TV screen every single time I've turned the TV on or seen it anywhere out in public? Trump.
Isn't that how FDR was elected into presidency? He was a familiar face. Or am I thinking of someone else?
Yep.
Reagan.
Yeah, Reagan? One of the two. Reagan, yeah, he was the movie star guy. No, that was FDR.
But, however...
Reagan was an actor.
Reagan was a cowboy.
I don't know. I'm just spitballing, man. Damn.
God damn it. Do we have to go back to fucking global American history? I mean...
No. Please.
American history, fucking, what was that? 8th grade?
Holy shit. Hey, what were they teaching you kids? Jesus Christ.
Well, 8th grade.
I don't know, dude. I feel like Sean's around my age and I learned.
I am around your age, and some things stayed and some things I forgot.
Like it was Reagan who was the actor, and Trump got voted in because Hillary is a violent offender.
Wait.
I really think the only reason Trump won is people disliked Hillary more than they disliked him.
That is 100%. Because she was the one candidate that everyone agreed. If she becomes president, we are going to be involved in a shit ton of wars. And she made it pretty clear when she was what the hell was she doing before? Secretary or something like that. But
how did she get to be secretary? Yeah, how did she get that job?
Oh, because she wanted to blow
Obama made her secretary.
Yeah, that's that was a Clinton's. I'm sorry, I'm taking over, but you're still going to be involved, and that was a Democratic thing. Hey, when you become president, you got to put her in the House.
Obama had to have Hillary because she has the most international experience of anybody else in Obama's cabinet.
Yeah,
the only one who's ever met with the most international leaders. Most of the people in Obama's cabinet never met with anybody but Americans and maybe some Canadians.
But the problem is
Hillary's political career goes back a long, long way. You know where she started? She was an aide for Richard Nixon.
Yeah, she
aide
she
in
worked in
the
his campaign
in
office
the
too.
Nixon White House. Yeah, she worked in the White House under Nixon.
Yeah, I know.
Now, Blue, this may be
Under Nixon.
this may be like a pretty sore subject, but uh, do you think that she should even have ran for president at her at her age?
Uh,
Because that was like one of the big other things, that reason why no one wanted her. It was like, is she capable of being the president at the moment?
I didn't have any real feelings that one way or the other about that. I mean, I think she would have been fine for, you know, physically, if that's what we're talking about.
But see, that's the other problem.
It, just her underhanded damn politics, I couldn't stomach.
Yeah, but
I did not vote. I did not vote for anybody. I voted against Hillary.
See, that's the thing. It's what choice did we have? And a lot of
That's
people,
the problem.
and I'm not. A lot of people noticed this when what's his name, Ross Perot was running, and he had the popular vote, period. And then it was just like election time came, and somehow, because he was independent, he had shit votes, and it was like, what is going on? And that's when
But he
everyone
didn't.
realized. Well, that was the thing.
He didn't have the popular vote though. He had at best 15 to 20% of the popular vote, not more than that ever.
You don't think?
No, I know he didn't. But the trouble was he wasn't taking votes away from the Democrats. He was taking votes away from the Republicans.
Yeah, that's correct. That's all he did.
So his arguments
would have lost horribly. It would have been a massacre if Perot hadn't been in that.
Oh, okay, I see.
But is that what Ross Perot decided to go? Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Ross Perot decided. Ross Perot decided his running mate was going to be a less than charismatic, shall we say, chap. Probably a very nice chap, but just a little lacking in the charisma, sort of.
Oh, so he rolled a 1 when he was doing his charisma stat.
Yeah. He was a bit, yeah.
But it's like, so we have the independent party, but nowadays, yeah, we all pretty much realize that's more of a, the blocker. Take some votes from here, and that's where their arguments will sway to. Again, I mean,
oh hell, we got a gazillion political parties.
Well, that's the thing.
All kinds of them, but no, there's only 2 that make any difference.
Well, there's only 2 that they give a shit to even give a chance. I mean,
yeah,
it's literally because most of these candidates can't get around the country like everyone else. Wouldn't it be fair Would it be more fair if it was like the federal government had a budget for the candidacy and they all went the same places everywhere? Wouldn't that make more sense? Wouldn't that be more fair to it?
I don't know.
Because like you said, anyone could run as long as you qualify. But if I have only $100,000 for my candidacy, I'm not going to every city. I can't. It'd be impossible. But all these other Trump, Hillary, they're going everywhere they need to go to make their voice heard. That definitely sways a vote.
Absolutely, that's where a guy like Ross Perot, who can reach in his pocket and pull out a regulation shit ton of money and spend it any way he likes, can achieve the level of support he was able to get. Just some no-name guy is never going to pull that off. It won't happen.
Now, would a way to change things be get rid of the parties?
How do you get rid of the parties?
I don't know.
I don't either.
I have no clue.
You're going to have to dissolve the whole government.
Apparently, because I don't know. I don't know. How do you? Is there a way? Is it possible to do that?
Government is
Well, no.
intrinsic. You cannot destroy it
Why not? Then what is anarchy?
unless you get a dictatorship. You will always have a government.
We're back to Mr. Anarchy again, aren't we?
Yeah.
No, piss off, go away. No.
Well, if anyone's in the building that is or listening, I am looking for a vegan to debate with.
I was a vegan.
You want to debate with a vegan?
Yes, because
I was
went
a vegan.
Because
Yeah, me too. 3 months.
Yeah, but everyone holds usually. See, Challen, you probably would. Most of them hold the stance of slaughtering animals all maliciously and meat's bad for you, and that's not true.
I eat
Yeah, well-
vegans. Does that count?
Well, okay, here.
Well, cows are vegan. Cows and chickens are
This is
vegan.
my
I
thinking.
eat vegans.
My thinking, Sean, that I felt like I shouldn't eat something that I couldn't kill. And I don't think that I could kill a pig or a cow. So I do eat chickens because I think and have killed a chicken. Okay. So I also was like, when I was a vegan, though, I would say it was the difference between eating life or death. Because when you eat vegetables and fruit, they're technically still alive, but when you eat meat, it's definitely dead. So then it became about taking in cells that have already begun necrotizing and whether or not that's going to cause my cells to trigger death.
Whoa.
What the hell did you say?
That's
that.
Because, see, one cell triggering necrotize. I'm not sure what the word is, but it's like
you
this
think
signal.
necrosis sets in when it dies straight away.
Well, I think that there are certain things that change about flesh after death that if you eat them could signal your cells.
Yes.
To think.
This is true. This is true. If a cow suffers, or so better yet, when you hunt, if the animal suffers, there is a endorphin that the animal releases, and it makes the meat very bitter, very bitter. That's kind of why a hunter's goal is to always, kill on the
Shoot
first
for the
shot.
head. Shoot for the
Well,
head.
that can happen if you burst a gland. That's why you want to be careful where you kill a deer.
Oh yeah.
Like where you wound it for its death.
Well, the whole gland thing is more when you're skinning it and taking out the insides.
That's another part too. But I mean, if you shoot a deer and you hit it in a gland, you've already spoiled the meat.
Yeah. You're talking the scent glands. I think that's as far as I know.
Yeah, and then when you're skinning it, you also have to be careful with where the glands are. You should know where all the glands are so that you make sure that you don't cut them open because the fluid inside the gland spilling into the meat will definitely make it bitter.
It spoils it. It's very bad, very, very bad.
I know these things.
Yeah, but there's this wonderful art that certain people do for cutting up these animals. And it's called butchery.
Yeah, it costs a lot of money too, though. If you when you go hunting and you kill an animal to take it to a butcher to do that, it costs an arm and a leg. Oh my god, that's why.
Here in Adelaide, you can get a whole lamb butchered for $80.
But what does this have to do with necrotizing cells?
I don't know what that
when
is.
you butcher an animal,
Wait.
Okay, that's cells. That's cells that have died.
I've worked in a meat packing plant.
Hang on, but
I've seen how these animals get slaughtered.
What is that called? What is what she said? The the cells thing. What is that?
Necrotizing or necrosis. It's when the flesh starts to die.
Oh,
but during butchering, there is not enough time for necrosis to set in.
Because it's frozen in its state, basically.
Well, no, so within a mass butchery, it's usually at a particular temperature, so as that no bacteria or anything can get into it.
Yeah, no bacteria, but the cells inside the meat had changed at the moment of death, and they began releasing a signal that let all the cells in the cow's body know that it was dead.
The second it's
and
dead,
begin
the animal is
decomposing.
dead.
Yeah, the second it's dead, it doesn't do that no longer.
Yeah, the cells can no longer make communication once it is dead. That is not possible.
That's why killing. That's why when you hurt an animal, it does happen because
the cells release something that is a signal to the other cells to die. And if you eat that signal, you could signal your own cells to die.
Well, that's the same thing. That's brain dead. That's all you're explaining. When someone goes brain dead, they have to keep the extremities alive. They have to keep everything going.
No, I'm talking about eating cells from the cow that are dead cells. And then you eat those cells, and then your cells think that you have dead cells and that you're dead, and then they die. Because they get the signal from the dead cells.
But the stomach doesn't work that way.
That's how it works.
The stomach doesn't transfer information like it does.
It puts the food that you eat goes into your bloodstream, and parts of dead cells could get into your bloodstream.
No cell. How? It's not like so when an animal dies, it's.
So when you're eating a steak, you're eating the cells of an animal, dead cells of an animal.
When you cook it, everything that's in that, all its blood, its veins, everything.
It all
no
stops.
Veins.
Yeah, huh?
There's no veins in a steak.
Once it's cooked, it all stops.
I meant anything. Well, if there's what do you call them? Veins. Yeah, there is. There's veins.
Not in steaks.
Yes, there is.
There's veins every inch of your body. If you look at one of those body picture things,
I don't really eat steak.
I know, but there's steak in everything. Otherwise, your body. The reason like your skin stays alive is that there's blood and everything's able to get to it. And
yeah, those are capillaries
that run off veins, right?
Yes, capillaries.
Well, yeah, but they're not veins; they're capillaries. Capillaries are totally different.
They're part of the vein system.
It's the little mini. It's like the.
He said there were veins in steak, and there aren't veins in steak, dude.
The capillary is the end of the vein where the blood goes into the flesh.
You're talking about the
I'm thinking about like stringy veins, dude. Like
those capillaries.
Even in a chicken leg, there's just a tendon. There's no veins.
Yeah, but you know when you skin your skin something, like if you scrape your arm or your knee or something, and it gets to that white meat, and then the blood comes from those little pores. Those are the capillaries.
Huh, I know.
But I know. They have to be fed blood from something. And
if there are any veins in steak.
And once you die, your body stops pumping. So your blood and your cells, they all they're dead. They don't.
Right, and when cells die, they release a signal, and that it's like a signal of death.
But that signal,
and if you're eating too much dead cell, then your body could also do the same, and cells could start releasing that signal.
But a signal, any signal sent by a cell was during its life. Once it's dead, it's no longer it can't send a signal because it needs something to send a signal from. Once the body is dead, it can't release a toxin. It can release a toxin during its death. But
these cells in this steak have already been through that. You see what I'm saying? And so now you're eating something that's already been through this.
But then cook it. Yeah, once you cook it, you're cooking all that away.
I don't know if you're not changing the cells back to living cells. Is my point.
They're going bye-bye, gone.
When you cook it,
everything.
They're completely inactive.
Cooking the cells out of it.
See, I see what you're saying. You're talking about like that cow. What is it called? The cow brain disease thing that was going on in the UK.
Bad cow? No, I'm not talking like that, but I am talking about like death being contagious because these cells are carrying a death signal, and that your cells might misinterpret that.
See, I don't think it's a death signal that you're talking about.
Necrotization in your body.
Because look this way: if a human eats another human's brain, they get some weird sickness or they die. I forget what it's called. But
you don't have to eat their brain. If you eat too much of a human being, you're going to get that sickness. Regardless, it doesn't matter what part you eat.
I thought it.
Yes, but we don't get that sickness from other animals. We only get it from human flesh.
But that's not the sickness I'm talking about. I'm talking about actual death.
It's a similar thing, but you can't catch death.
Well, you can.
I want to know how these cells are active after you've cooked the meat.
They're not active, they're dead, and that's the point.
Then how can a dead cell actually create a chemical change in your body to say, time to start dying?
Because that's what it is. It is that already. And if other cells see that, they might not realize that that's a cell you've ingested. They might think that that's a cell in your body and then follow suit.
That's not how digestion works.
Like you said you wanted to argue with a vegan.
That's not an argument. I don't get where you're getting this.
It is an argument. I've heard it before from vegans.
Yeah, because vegans are woo.
I've never heard that one. That was crazy. That one was.
This is about ingesting the necrotized cells and then causing your cells to necrotize.
Wouldn't that be
through
the
a
same?
signal.
But then wouldn't that happen more? Wouldn't that happen definitely with plants?
What?
Plants.
No, because plants are alive when you eat them.
No, they're not. You kill them. That's why
Yes, they
go-
are. No, you don't
What?
kill them. You
Wait,
just
wait,
chop
what?
them up. You just chop them up. Built away because they can't get water
So then-
internally.
Then
And then
would be-
eventually,
that would be even
maybe
worse
they'd be
in
like
plants.
dead.
Then what you're saying is even worse than plants. Then because the cells are still alive, and when you're eating them,
Right,
they
and
would
that's better
signal
for
to them.
you to eat life than it is to eat death.
Wait, so we should be eating animals alive?
No, you can't eat animals alive because then
Why?
you'll get sick, but you can eat plants while they're
No,
alive and
you
not
can
get sick.
You can eat fresh meat.
I mean, some people do.
All the time.
The accepted tradition is to not. And if you're eating it raw, Sean, then you're completely defeating this purpose of cooking it to get rid of necrotism.
I cook it, but I know there are people that don't.
Yeah, see, so when they're not cooking it, especially they're putting themselves at risk for this necrotization.
I don't know if that's a thing. Like, every time you say it, I just
Necrotism. That's like scientism.
Necroticism.
Necroticism.
I don't know if you're talking about like doing the cells. Like, I'm so confused.
If a piece of flesh has got necrosis, you don't cook it and eat it. You throw it away.
We're not talking about psoriasis. We're talking about something that you can't see with the naked eye.
Psoriasis.
Oh my God.
That
I'm not
comes
planning on
freaking kidney
I'm
failure.
not planning on jumping over the fence and taking a big bite out of old Bessie. That's for sure.
No, right? Could you imagine? You get kicked in the face.
Oh, still,
Gladys?
cow. I'm hungry.
Gladys, push your monitor out of punching range. Because necrotism is going to kill you via injection.
Necrotism. You're gonna get necrotized.
What's on the run for it?
I'm scared.
The thing is, Channel Q's got a huge grin on her face right now.
She does.
Oh, that's brilliant. It was good while it lasted. Eat meat. Eat meat, that's why we have sharp teeth.
Yeah, I would argue that our teeth are not for tearing meat because they're not like a dog's teeth. A dog is supposed to rip meat from bones, right? But my teeth are nothing like a dog's teeth, right? My teeth are different. My teeth are only meant to rip flesh of fruit and root vegetables.
What are your
Are
canines
you a
then
dog?
for?
Are you a dog?
They're not
Then
canines.
why compare
Dog's
yourself to a
teeth,
dog?
dude.
Compare yourself to a gorilla that actually eats monkeys.
I'm sorry. What do you call it?
Gorillas
Incisors,
don't
right?
eat meat. When do gorillas ever eat meat?
Gorillas don't eat meat.
Oh, cute.
They
Yes,
eat
they do,
termites.
Gorillas don't eat meat. Gorillas do.
Yes,
not
they
eat
do,
meat.
Sean.
Do they go hunting for rabbits?
No, they eat monkeys.
I don't know. The gorillas
eat
diet
termites.
Hang on, it says the diet. It says the gorillas diet
And
consists of
fruits
eating
and
40%
bananas.
pounds of vegetables and fruits daily. Gorillas are primary herbivores and occasionally snack on termites, ants, and termite larvae. But gorillas
Thank you.
do not eat meat or the
Thank
flesh of
you.
any other animals. In addition,
Thank
they eat termites and ants that are covered in nutrient-rich soil. I have
Thank
never heard of
you.
gorillas eating. I know there are chimps. I know there are monkeys that do hunt other monkeys and eat them and shit like that. It's crazy. But gorillas, no, they're herbivores. They do not eat meat.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I'm asking this guy, like, what meat do they eat? The biggest meat they eat is a termite, dude. Really? And then you don't even need teeth to eat a termite. Come on.
Yeah, I've never heard of a gorilla eating meat.
So that's what I'm saying. Our teeth are not designed to rip flesh from bones. Meat eaters, like a wolf or a lion. Think even our molars. Have you ever looked at the molars of a lion or a wolf? Dude, they're
Here's the
not like a
problem.
human's.
Here's a problem.
Our teeth are
Our
shaped like this to
faces-
rip the flesh from fruit
Yeah.
and root vegetables.
No. Our faces are set up like a predator.
Our eyes in the front.
Yep.
Yeah, but that doesn't have anything to do with what we're supposed to eat. That has everything to do with
yes, it
how
does.
intimidating or safe we can be.
What? No.
Yeah.
No. The reason prey.
Do you imagine
The
walking
reason-
upright and forward with your eyes on the side of your head, Sean?
Yeah, you'd have a lot more sense of protection and defense for predators.
You'd be like a giraffe.
But if
You'd be like a giraffe.
if you evolve to become a predator, your eyes would be in the front. And your incisors, is that what they're called? Yeah. We have those. I'm sorry I call them canine. That's what we're taught that they're called, but they're incisors.
Yeah, but those are just for like biting into apples and potatoes.
What the fuck? You don't need sharp teeth to do that?
Yes, you do.
Huh?
Try biting into an apple with no teeth.
Yeah, you don't. What the hell?
Watch it. Try to get a wolf to bite an apple. Take a bite out of an apple. Get a horse to take a bite out of an apple.
Oh, good.
I mean, we're
example.
talking about teeth.
Do horses have those sharp teeth?
No.
Okay.
They don't. They have teeth like us.
Wait, horses do? You don't. You have.
Like us.
Wait, time out. You have incisors. You do realize that those are the quote unquote canines.
Yeah, but they're not. They're like gorillas. Gorillas don't eat meat.
Yeah, but
You're right. Canine incisors are huge, dude, and they're curled. They're fangs,
so are you saying
dude.
that we?
I have fucking fangs.
So do we eat like thick?
They have fangs, so they can get in between the bones and push the meat out with their teeth. You know when you're trying to eat a chicken bone and you're trying to push that meat, you got to put your finger and push the meat, and then you can get it with your teeth. The dog can do that without using fingers because he don't have fingers, so he can use his teeth. That's why his teeth are shaped that way.
I can't. I sat here trying to figure out something to say, and I can't.
Look, I'm telling you, we don't have meat eating teeth.
Yes, we do. We have omnivoric teeth.
They're lying to you because they want to feed you meat because they want to make money off of cows.
Okay, so gorillas have been known to eat
source
flesh. Hang on.
Okay.
Hang on.
This is obviously
Chimpanzees
going
and
to be from a
bonobos
website
are
that
known
hates
to
gorillas.
hunt monkeys.
Those are not gorillas. Those are chimps.
They
they're
are
not
of
gorillas.
the same lineage.
Oh, okay, dude, we're not doing lineage because then you're talking monkeys are the same lineage as fucking chimpanzees.
I'll get into hominids.
They're not.
Hominea.
We've got
if you want.
we got tails and no tails. So chimpanzees no tails, gorillas no tails. So those are apes. Monkeys have tails.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, chimpanzees.
Show me
and
where it
bonobos
says
are-
gorillas have been known to eat flesh. 'Cause
Orangutans are great apes.
Okay, but here's the thing. Chimpanzees and gorillas that we're talking about are not the same. Therefore, in the idea of that gorillas do not eat meat, just because you found something in the ape family, we know they eat meat. Oh, Jesus Christ. First
Screw you,
proof.
hippie.
I'm gonna look at it right now. No, share it with everyone so they can see what I'm looking at. You guys can kiss my ass until I share it. Hang on.
Like chimpanzees aren't eating meat either.
Yes, they are. Chimpanzees hunt other monkeys and other chimpanzee groups and eat them.
Yes, chimpanzees are known to eat their children as well.
What about orangutans? Orangutans are great apes.
I'm pretty sure they're nice. They seem like pretty.
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah,
they
it's a
eat
bit-
meat.
Yeah, orangutans are laid back.
Gorillas eating insects that eat. Okay, hang on. If this is Davros, I'll kick your ass if this is because they eat insects. It says while some
No. I reiterated my statement. It has been shown that gorillas eat flesh, right? I didn't say anything else, but I then premised by saying chimpanzees and bonobos are known to hunt monkeys.
The flesh of what though? For the gorillas, because I'm looking.
Read the freaking article.
That's what I was about to do, and you stopped me. Damn it!
Get a buddy, get a fur. Come on, Sean. That's why
So
you
it
had me on the
says-
show.
This guy's comment. Wait, this guy's comment. I make money off cows by tipping them over and stealing their wallets.
Renee.
Okay, so it says, I gotta get someone verified real quick. I don't know who the hell you are. Who are you? Oh, damn. It's always weird when you see someone with like 1,000 fucking servers that you're in. Let's see. There you go. You're good to go. Discord. Oh, I know who you are. Okay, so it says gorilla eating insects that eat mammals. Okay, it says there may well be more mundane explanations for the surprising findings, explanations that would have ruled out before gorillas could reclassified as meat eaters. In a study, co-author Grant, blah blah blah. For example, gorillas are known to eat ants that salvage their carcasses and bones of monkeys and other animals. When gorillas eat the motherfucker. It says when gorillas eat ants, they also are ingesting a lower expel of the mammal DNA in the ant's digestive tract.
Oh my god. This is almost as bad as my necrotism argument.
No, but go down to the next part. Go down to the next.
Okay, gorillas wouldn't be alone eating monkeys. That one? It says, if gorillas do not eat meat, they wouldn't be the first great apes to do so. Chimpanzees and their bonobo cousins are known to hunt and eat other mammals, including monkeys. Okay? Plus, most herbivores can digest meat quite well, said study. There's nothing here that says gorillas eat meat. Nothing!
No, Sean, when the ant eats the meat and then the gorilla eats the ant, it is therefore eaten meat.
Yes, it's getting the necroticism thingy.
That just happened.
Yeah, gorillas ain't eating no steaks, yo.
Oh, man.
Come on, Sean, have you been having fun?
On the Barbie.
I don't know if I'm having
I mean,
fun.
you don't know. Do your cheeks hurt right now?
I just read a damn article that you just...
I don't think humans are supposed to eat meat.
Secretly eat meat and no one's seen it happen. They may not have seen it happen.
That's an argument of retardation.
Sean.
And that's the other thing. I'm coming up with my own terms from now on.
I feel like it's okay for humans to eat like fish and birds, but not anything else.
Why? What's the difference?
Well, because fish and birds are easier to raise and they cost less than, say, pigs and cows. And pigs and cows are mammals, so I feel like they have more feelings. I know for a fact fish don't have any feelings.
You mean because a mammal can essentially look up at you and say,
it can look up at you and say, don't eat me!
It will hurt.
Yeah, like that's the really bad part about it.
Okay, I see.
But like if they looked at me like that, I'd be like, okay, let's go get some ice cream, you know?
We didn't become the dominant species on the planet by eating salad.
Eating what?
Salad. Kale.
You can't prove that we wouldn't have became a more dominant species if we had just eaten salad.
Yeah,
we would have been eaten by saber-toothed tigers.
And you would have been busy eating too busy eating to advance.
Well, maybe that would have been better for us. Maybe we'd have less pollution.
Yes, but we progressed by eating meat. That's how we got away from the Neanderthals.
Progressed into what?
What we are today.
But prove that that's better than anything else we could do.
Whoa. You said something digital that I don't agree with. I feel that we were eating meat long before we started cooking it and long before foraging was ever effective.
Oh no!
I don't know.
Foraging was
I don't
first.
think we were eating meat. I
Wait,
think we were
how is
eating nuts and
foraging?
berries and root vegetables and fruits because that's
But
obvious.
Aboriginals in Australia have been cooking for meat for tens of thousands of years.
Okay, but well,
So yeah, stick that up, you goat, and smoke it.
I don't know what side of the argument you're saying. I'm saying that we ate meat probably.
I'm agreeing with you that we've actually been cooking meat for longer than people think.
Yeah,
Well,
but
But
that's
it's
why
the
we
fact that
invented
but I still
fire.
think the
Was just
civilizations
to,
were eating before we
barbecue.
started cooking it.
yeah, they would have fortified it or
Invented fire so we could start having barbecues.
No, go further back. Keep
no, they
going.
would have known about certain spices and whatnot to
Before
fortify
that.
meat, like
Before
jerky.
Before that.
Well, they would have beat the shit out of it until it went brown.
I guarantee you they were cooking meat long before they were spicing it.
Oh no! I'm not talking about spicing meat for cooking. I'm talking about salting it so it could turn into jerky.
I'm pretty sure
preserved
okay,
meat.
I see what you're saying. Before. Okay, yes, I agree.
Yeah, fortifying it. Yeah. So all they would do is they would put it out in the sun. They would cover it with something, and then it would cure, and then they would have meat to eat. That is the most likely scenario.
But see, when you say you're talking about once we became human.
No.
I don't think that's what they did.
I did not say that. I'm also talking about back to the Australopithecus and about them learning how to create tools to learn how to use tools and shit for hunting.
If I had to guess, I would say
down on the savannah.
This is how it happened. Look, this is what happened. Okay, the cavemen were out looking for some warthogs or some shit to take a bite out of. Okay, and then all of a sudden there was like a forest fire, right? And inside the forest fire, there was some warthogs burning, and they smelled it, and they were like, "Oh!" And so then they started repeating that, and then they ate the warthogs burned.
I said that yesterday.
Well, I didn't hear you yesterday, but I'm glad we're thinking alike.
It kind of scares me with your necrophilia.
Yeah, I don't know what he's talking about either, Grizz. I feel like that's a good way to get maggots on your steak. As far as I know, to cure meats, you need things like vinegar, smoke, something.
Yeah, because they had vinegar 100,000 years ago. No, they would have just covered it in salt and put it out in the sun to dry.
Where they fucking getting salt from, mister?
Yeah. You do keep saying salt like it was
somewhere
just like,
I don't know about.
Like they had one of those guys that with the salt shaker and the pepper. Just put a little salt on it.
Who the fuck is gonna eat a steak that's soaked in salt anyways? Like, oh my god, dude.
It's called beef jerky.
It's called what?
You've never eaten beef jerky?
Oh, shit,
don't they smoke that?
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah,
so
smoking.
we've refined the art of making jerky, right? But primitive people would have had a simpler system.
Explain.
People weren't making jerky, dude.
Yeah, they were. I guarantee that they were making jerky long before they were cooking
and shit and salt to make it.
Well, that's my questioning. How would they have done? And wouldn't dirt be the same thing?
Probably. And then they probably found a finer, whiter powder that worked.
Like cocaine.
No, not like cocaine.
It's fucking shredded coconut, dude. Come on.
I knew there was something up with that stuff.
You real, dude.
Actually,
it's either shredded coconut or mango, dude.
Have you seen the title of Jose's show for today?
I haven't.
It's called Dear Vegans, I Killed a Cow. It was eating your food.
Did he already start?
I think so, yeah.
I don't know why he didn't tell me. He was supposed to come in here and let me know.
That was earlier.
Did he come in earlier? No, but remember when he came, he said he was going to let me know
he's live.
about streaming. Oh, well.
But that's not the name. It says Asylum.
You must have
He is live, dude. He just went live right over you.
Fucking Jose.
No, it's his thumbnail. Read his thumbnail. It says, Dear Vegans, I killed this cow because it was eating your food. You're welcome.
You know what I should do?
No, the thumbnail that it says for me is to say protein again. I dare you. I double dare you.
You know what I should do? You guys know what I should do? I should live stream Jose's live stream.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but will I still be able to talk?
Yeah.
Actually,
what
what
The
I
live
want,
critiquing?
I'll just be
yeah,
showing
what
his
I want
screen.
is blue to debate Aaron.
Why?
Because blue will destroy him.
Anybody will destroy him.
Destroy who?
I'm assuming Aaron.
You guys
But when
didn't
you get into
even
the
destroy my
flirts and
necrotism argument.
all this
You just
stupid
laughed at it.
Destroyed
conversation
yourself
when
by
they're
laughing.
arguing us, and we know what's right. And I, and I respect,
Okay,
you
so
at
the
one
only way for
time
you
thought
guys
that,
to hear what
thought
I'm
it
hearing
was flat, and that you did your
is that I
research,
put
and
my
that you,
speakers on, but I'll be back
are
from
willingly
echoing.
open to talking about that.
So you guys have
But
to
when
watch it
there are
yourselves.
people that
Or actually, no,
know for
wait.
a
Here we
fact
go.
that it is
Tell me if you guys can.
round,
You have
and
sound
they
to it.
argue till they're blue
When I
in
do
the
this,
face
hang
that
on.
it's flat, that's what irritates me. And or they talk about the
I don't know if
stupidest
sound
topics
is
about,
part of this whole share system.
I don't know. I think probably a couple months ago we were talking
I
about
don't hear
people
nothing.
who
Yeah, I don't think it works that way.
were doing something. I'm like, you know what? If you don't like it, then just don't talk
Is
to
it
them.
me,
Don't
or has
communicate
everyone
with
left
them.
and gone
Don't,
over to Jose's?
I think so.
don't
No, only
give
half.
them the
There's only
fuel
10
and
people
let them
left.
fuel that fire.
Yeah. Oh, that's when me and Spurs got into it on my channel.
Oh, is that what it was?
Oh, wait.
Like
Okay.
Jose's.
Yeah, they're talking stupid. I don't want that on my stream.
Oh,
He's
they're talking
got.
stupid.
It looks like it says Nicole something.
There's Crash's girl.
Oh, okay. And then Aaron is there, I think.
Yeah, Aaron, and then those are the only two because Jose and then Jose's main account is in there.
But everybody's
No.
muted.
No name.
Laid back.
Oh, okay.
No way. Are we doing Blue versus Aaron? No. No.
No, Jose's just talking right now. That's why everyone's muted. You can't see his main account up in the top right. Remember, he's sharing his screen, so you see what he sees, so you don't see him talking in it.
Whatever, dude.
I gotta go make a video anyway. So
yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and end it anyway. I wasn't planning on going very long. I had fun. Let me see. Yeah, no.
glad you did, son.
I would say, go ahead, say it again.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah,
thanks.
I want to keep going on more and more again. I just want to. Next one is going to be a little bit more topic specific, but I like having the open hangouts and stuff. And once everyone kind of melts into it, we'll keep having fun.
Yeah,
Aaron's buying his way again.
Oh, isn't that cute?
Of course he is.
No, I'm actually surprised that they didn't ask you, Blue, if you remember when they first started cooking meat, since they have an idea that you might remember such.
That was awesome. Oh, so
you know, it's a good thing I'm such a good-natured son of a bitch.
You son of a bitch.
I can be a real pain in the ass. Everybody loves to pick on me. That's okay. I don't care.
Good to be old. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
You get to live long. That's an accomplishment.
I mean, you've been around
Not
longer than
everybody
everyone
gets
else.
to be old. That I do.
I'm glad.
All right.
I don't think I'm going to get very old, so.
I'm never getting old. Fuck that. Anyone got anything you want to promote? I'm gonna let Blue get old for me.
Oh, I'm doing it for a lot of people right now.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. You have no idea.
Hey, I don't mind taking one for the team. Believe me.
Yeah, I'll get old for you too, Sean. Don't worry.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well,
Well,
why don't you get old for
6 years
Channel
older
Q,
than.
because she doesn't want to get old either.
Well, my favorite brain dead dipshit, that guy, has come out with yet another video. So I'm going to break a record and do 3 in a row on the same asshole.
Nice. So yeah, go check out Blue. Wait, this is this still stemming from the same topic, like the same thing from before Blue with him?
Yeah.
Tying out in it.
Jeez. That's
This time he's I'll just give you one of the funny parts. He subtracts 18 from 180 and ends up with 172. Now I don't know how he did that.
Huh.
Yeah. we seem to be somewhat challenged with our math abilities.
Hey, but restructure and how science works all together, huh?
It's gonna be funny.
All right, we're gonna get out of here. I'll probably go live tomorrow, maybe. We'll see.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
You too, Blue. Thanks for being there.
See you, Blue.
Good night.
Thank you, Digital. Thank you, Channel. I'm gonna go ahead and mute up and then end this damn thing, and then go over and form some chaos to happening over at Jose's.
Yes, I'm
Very
going
cool.
to join you.
All right. Thank you, guys. I do.
Because I want to take the shit. Yeah, I want to piss off Aaron.
Sounds fun.
Always fun.
All right, guys. That was the fun of it. Like I said, it was just open. Whatever happens, happens. I was actually kind of entertained by their questions at the end. Seemed very odd to be questions, but at the same time, oh well. I think tomorrow I wanted to do some climate stuff, some stuff I came across that I wanted to share with all, and maybe see if I can get the masses to understand where I'm coming from. It is going to be less of a conspiracy, as more of a information, just to catch up on what's going on with that Scope X and the other carbon capture ideas that they're using right now. But other than that, guys, I'm gonna get out of here. I'll see you guys over at Jose's. Again, you guys can join my Discord server if you want to join the panel, or just stick around. It's nothing big. It's just only where this is the one I'm gonna use only for live streaming. So any things that's going on, the stuff that you guys were seeing earlier today, I kind of show it to you guys right now. This stuff, this server, and you guys can get in there. I'll get you guys permissions and whatever you guys need in there. But other than that, I'm gonna get the hell out of here. Peace.